told me to train until my bones cracked. Who denied me my destiny?
I was apprenticed to the most powerful being in the galaxy once. I was destined to become so much more.
So, with Kung Fu Panda 4 coming soon, and the return of Tai Lung, I can imagine that this entry in the series has got some hype behind it. E. McShane has that effect on people. Anyone who has seen John Wick knows exactly what I mean. And with that, I thought this would be an ideal time to do a short analysis on not just Tai Lung, but of Darth Maul from Star Wars, as their stories are quite similar. Now, considering that Maul's story has ended, and up until recently, Tai Lung's ended back in 2008, God, that makes me feel like an old man, there are numerous differences between the Zabrak assassin and the Snow Leopard. The big differences lie in how they were raised and how their stories were written. Whereas Maul was thoroughly fleshed out as a character across Clone Wars and Rebels, Tai Lung existed purely as a medium to push the message of the first film and to act as a parallel to Poe. Not to mention that in terms of father figures, the contrast there is like oil versus water. But there are just as many similarities as there are differences. For starters, both were trained from the age of diapers in their respective fields. Maul was trained in the ways of the Sith, which made him an incredibly deadly opponent, to the extent that he was able to survive on dangerous planets with only his bare hands, and take down Jedi Knights without using his lightsaber. This was before he was able to survive being cut in half by saturating himself in the dark side, by the way. And let's not forget his most accomplished feat, ending Liam Neeson, which, in and of itself, is no easy task. At the same time, Tai Lung was trained in various methods of kung fu to the extent where he can easily escape a maximum security prison and then proceed to put 5 of the most famous masters out of commission like he was just doing a warm-up exercise. And in addition to being trained to the peak of physical condition after a lifetime in trials and tribulations, both of their stories take a hard left into tragic figure territory, as both were promised glory by their respective masters, only to have the floor ripped right out from under their feet. Only in the case of one, this is far more literal than figurative. Tai Lung is obvious, as Shifu had essentially groomed him to be a dragon warrior out of love for his adoptive son, and a sense of pride in himself as a teacher. I mean, if you saw your adoptive son transform into a master of the craft you yourself have studied for decades, you'd be overcome with a sense of hubris yourself. Also, teaching him everything he knew probably wasn't the best thing, considering how quickly he was able to disband the 5. Even Sidious didn't teach Maul everything. So when Tai Lung is imprisoned after being denied what he believed to be rightfully his, you can't help but feel a sense of pity for him when he confronts his master and father figure after years in exile.
What I ever did, I did to make you proud. Tell me how proud you are, Shifu. Tell me!
Cut to Maul, who was given a very similar upbringing to Tai Lung. Though a large difference between them is that Maul was brought up to be a weapon and a means to an end for Palpatine's machinations instead of being raised like a son. And being groomed as a Sith assassin, he was taught only to dominate and to utilize his anger, hate, and rage with a dark passion.
I gutted him while you stood helpless and watched. How did that make you feel, Obi-Wan?
But he was still fed the same story that he was destined to do great things, and this can be best exemplified when he was a boy and was shown the massacre that occurred on Malachor. Those who have seen Rebels know exactly what massacre I'm talking about, with the bodies of Jedi and Sith frozen in place Pompeii style. During this little excursion, Sidious force-fed Maul the ashes of the fallen Sith so that he could experience what had transpired all those years ago. This caused his hatred and his rage to fuel him even more than it had previously, as intaking those ashes caused him to experience what had happened firsthand, and his master then telling him that together they will take their revenge on the Jedi and regain their place in the galaxy. He even says as much in The Phantom Menace.
At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge.
However, this goes sideways as he ends up being bisected and exiled for over a decade before he's able to get a new set of legs and reclaim his sanity. His hate and yearning for vengeance now burning within him like a supernova. And much like Tai Lung, he returns from exile with an explosive homecoming and works to take both his revenge on Obi-Wan and build up a power base. Cut to the students confronting their masters, and this is where the similarities between the Forsaken Warriors halt in place, as their father figures, as I said before, couldn't be further apart from one another. Where one raised his son to be a disposable weapon, and the other raised his son like, well, a son. So when Shifu apologizes to Tai Lung, you can feel the sadness and sincerity in his words.
I have always been proud of you, and it was my pride
too much to see what you were becoming. What I was turning you into.
Sidious, however, does not care for sentimentality at all. This is the face of the man who took out his entire family in cold blood and did not feel any remorse at all. I would like to note that I'm not giving Shifu a pass for his bad parenting, I'm simply making comparisons. So when it comes to their final confrontation, minus the son of Dathomir, which was great by the way, he attacks Maul and his brother Savage and reminds his former student as to why he is the true Lord of the Sith, to show him how small he truly is in comparison, and gives him the promise that more pain and humiliation is to come.
Remember, there can only be two, and you are no longer my apprentice.
Have mercy. Please, please.
There is no mercy.
But even when hearing Shifu's confession and his apology, Tai Lung doesn't relent, as he wants nothing more but to claim the power he was promised, and to finally take his revenge on those who had thrown him into a pit to rot away until the chains that held him down had fully served their purpose. As for Maul, despite surviving Order 66 in truly epic fashion, and later dealing with the collapse of the Shadow Collective, he still seeks out power and vengeance however he can, whether it be using the superweapon inside the Malachor Temple, or doing his damnedest to track down Obi-Wan. And at the end of it all, both meet their end without fully claiming their retribution, and the power they craved, now forever lost. So even though the differences between the Zabrak and the Snow Leopard can be pretty wide at times, their stories run parallel to each other almost perfectly. And at times you can't help but feel bad for them, as we could all see them having a bright future if their thoughts weren't clouded by false hopes and ambitions that were pumped into their minds from day one. They didn't need to be these monsters. And though they work well as villains in their respective franchises, it makes you wonder how they could have turned out if they were able to drop the destiny they believed they were denied, and simply retire somewhere far off and live in peace once they regained their freedom. In the end, their lust for power and vengeance against those that had given them false hope, slighted them, or cast them aside, led them further and further into their own personal pit of despair before they eventually met their end at the hands of those that were their betters in both technique and character. So this was just a little idea that had been bouncing around in my head for quite a while now, and I hope those of you that tuned in enjoyed it. I am pretty psyched for the next installment of Kung Fu Panda, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Tai Lung could bring to the story this time around. His return is a surprise to be sure, but a welcomed one, and let's see if his time in the spirit world has given him a little perspective on things. Either which way, we get Ian McShane back, and if you enjoyed what I served up with this little number, comment your thoughts down below, and don't forget to like, subscribe for more, and share it with those who you think may enjoy little things like this. I'm also trying to get these videos out a bit quicker, so if you want to know when one drops, please hit that bell icon to stay notified.
Do it.
Godspeed, and I'll see each of you in the next installment.